Chapter 2 Princess Marissa. The sun was barely up, making the dark blue sky look strangely beautiful. The clouds had flecks of dark red and orange, illuminating off of the mountains of the silhouetted horizon. Cool air came in through the large doorway which opened out to a balcony, overlooking the kingdom of Wichterich. The beautiful but eerie sky of the early morning made the courtyard of the castle and village beyond look dark and gloomy. Long scarlet-colored curtains that hung in the large entryway fluttered in the early morning breeze, appearing like clots of dancing blood that were caught up into the air. Silhouettes of leaves from vines that grew around the balcony danced in the breeze, as well as two huge potted rose bushes that grew on either side of the balcony. Marissa stood before the massive threshold of the balcony, staring out into the world beyond, lost in thought. The cool breezes of the morning felt good against her body. Her long red wavy hair fell below her bosom and down her back, and her long white nightgown fluttered in the breeze. She looked angelic, like a being of light. That day was her 16th birthday, and the first day of the rest of her life as a woman. That day was supposed to be a happy day, a great day that would involve lavish gifts and full attention, ending in a great feast and a grand ball that would be held in her honor. But to Marissa, that day was a day of great change, and change she did not want. It was her last day as a free person in Wichterich, to do whatever she wanted with her friends, to love whomever she wanted, and to just be free. Before the great feast, she would meet her future husband, whom she had been betrothed to since birth, for the very first time. After the great feast, there would be a royal ball. Then they would be introduced to the courtiers and everyone else associated with the royal family as the new king and queen of a whole other kingdom that she didn't even care about. Then bright and early the very next morning, they would be off to that kingdom to be married, and that is where she would live for the rest of her life. Marissa didn't know what kind of people lived in that kingdom. She didn't even know what kind of husband she would have. All Marissa knew was that Prince Philip was from a whole other country, a rather large kingdom by the name of Wichterich. She didn't even know if they spoke the same language. That day was the day she had been dreading for a very long time. Marissa knew that day would come, but instead of coping with it emotionally, she had been pushing it in the back of her mind, and now that it was there, she thought it was insufferable. Marissa wrapped her arms tightly around her bosom as shivers went down her back. The early morning breeze made the opened room chilly and filled with the scent of the outside air, which was actually pleasing to her even though she grew cold. She walked to the bathing room of her chamber, which was not too much smaller than her actual room. An opened arched doorway led to it. Her bathing room consisted of a bathtub, a large washing basin that sat on the top of a tall standing table, a large standing mirror, and a small wooden vanity that had a smaller mirror on it, along with candles, a hairbrush, and other things a young maid might need. With the candles unlit, the room barely had any light. A small window above the commode on the far wall let in as much light as the early morning would allow. She walked into the small room, wishing that hot water was ready for her in the tub. Lilith usually had the water ready for her every day when she woke up in the morning, with a lovely breakfast waiting for her when she was done bathing. She would miss that too, even though she was not too fond of Lilith. She wanted to fetch Lilith to start her morning routines, but decided to leave her alone. The bright sun would be peeking out over the mountains soon anyways. That morning was different. She woke up way earlier than normal because of the anxiety that lingered in her heart and soul. Marissa stood in front of the mirror, studying herself from head to toe. She imagined herself as being a queen over a totally different country. She tilted her head slightly, still looking into the mirror, wondering if anyone in Wichterich had red hair. Her long red curls were lovely as they hung just below her chest. Her clear eyes pierced into her own reflection as she began to think more. But not of what she would be gaining as a queen, but of what she would be losing as a princess, and she hated what she would be losing. Marissa detested the fact that she wouldn't see her father or the people of Wichterich anymore after that day. She also couldn't stand how she would never see her sister-like friend, Natalia, ever again, or even Taryn, for that matter. Marissa and Natalia were the same age and had known each other since they were small children. As young children, they would always run and skip through the halls of the great castle or sneak out into the courtyard to play. Lady Natalia was a courtier and belonged to the Ducray family. The noble family consisted of noblewoman Lady Christiane and nobleman Lord Fernand. Natalia and her family always attended every party, dinner, and social event that was hosted by the king. Marissa and Natalia were always together, even so when they met Taryn for the first time. Taryn was a couple of years older than both Marissa and Natalia. He wasn't part of the aristocracy of Misselthwaite, but only a common boy. Taryn and his mother, Morel, owned a small shop in the marketplace of Misselthwaite. They sold all kinds of trinkets, fresh herbs, and natural remedies, as well as things like fresh honey and preserves and even natural spring water all the way from Haven Springs, from across the land of Misselthwaite. Their shop wasn't a big shop like some of the other entrepreneurs, but a small, quaint little tent with a wooden frame and a large piece of fabric that hung over the top. They made just enough money to buy food, if they didn't get it from the land, and cheap fabric to make their clothes with. Taryn and Morel lived in a small cottage in the Forest province that was built by Taryn's father. As a child, Taryn did everything his father did. He learned everything from his father, everything dealing with nature, hunting, and the Holy Father of Light. He showed him what was edible that God put on the earth and what wasn't. Taryn was also taught how to fish and how to clean them afterwards. During each lesson, Taryn's father would tell him many stories and legends, some true and others too outrageous to even be true. He also learned how to read and write from his father, the Book of Light being the first book he had ever read. Taryn's father taught him so much, but everything changed when he was 12 years old. Taryn's father died from an accident in the woods when he was that age, leaving him as the man of the house. Taryn wasn't as social as his mother, or anyone else for that matter. He would always be found in the marketplace, the town square, or in the forests, continuing where his father left off, or just expanding his knowledge of the great outdoors even more. On much of his time, Taryn would be found resting under the trees or by the fountains playing his wooden flute in the town square. And that was where Marissa and Natalia met Taryn for the first time when they were carefree adolescents in the town square. Taryn was sitting beneath a tree eating an apple and reading an old-looking book, while Marissa and Natalia spotted him while shopping for new brooches. The two girls were accompanied by 3 handmaidens. 2 of them were Marissa's, Lilith and Katrinka, and the other was Natalia's, who was called Sora. Marissa smiled as tears began to form in her blue eyes. Her mind drifted away even more as she thought of Taryn. She still remembered everything so clearly. She remembered being amazed at how well Taryn knew how to read, considering that he was a young peasant boy. Her and Natalia had just purchased new brooches and were moving on to the next shop when she noticed a dark-haired boy reading beneath a flowering tree. She noticed the small, thick book as he was reading and how old it looked. "What are you reading, boy?" asked Marissa. She noticed how surprised he looked as he peered up at her, realizing who she was. His face was fresh and handsome, shy and humble. He stood up quickly and bowed down to her. She remembered that her and Natalia giggled, covering their mouths so not to embarrass him. She also remembered the looks of disapproval that the handmaidens had on their plain faces because of her talking to a peasant boy. Strangely, Lilith stood a little ways away, covering her mouth and holding her stomach as if she were sick. Marissa never understood why she never went near Taryn that afternoon or any time after that. "What is your name, boy?" Marissa asked, still smiling. She remembered how red his face was, making his blue eyes look even bluer. "Taryn, your highness," he said, looking very nervous. Marissa remembered what book he was reading because she had to study copies of its pages as well as other things every day. She walked past her family's book, the original book, many times in the castle library because it always sat in the same spot on a little table below a massive stained glass window, the legendary Book of Light. "I see you love the tenacious words of our Father of Radiance," Marissa said, sounding mature and well-educated for a young princess. He nodded, and she noticed him looking around at the other women who were staring at him, especially Lilith, who gave him an unpleasant and nervous look. "Yes, your ladyship," he answered. "The book was passed down to me from my father and my ancestors." "Strange how you come about it. It's such a rare book to come by indeed. Your family is wise and able. I am Princess Marissa, but you can just call me Marissa if you are comfortable enough to. And this is the Lady Natalia Ducray," she said, motioning towards her petite, dark-haired friend. She remembered that he blushed again, lowering his face. "Your Royal Highness, we must go," Lilith snapped, still covering her mouth and nose, nauseated by the presence of Taryn. "It was enchanting to have met you," Marissa said with a smile as they began to walk again. Taryn's cheeks appeared as red as a rose. Marissa remembered that they left quickly, and as they left, she turned back at Taryn, waving goodbye. After that day, the three of them became secretly inseparable. Marissa still looked into the mirror, coming out of her thoughts and daydreams. She was startled as she noticed a dark figure in the reflection of the mirror, standing behind her in the doorway. She inhaled a rush of air as she turned around quickly. "Lilith, you frightened me," Marissa fussed as she held her chest. She could feel her heart beating quickly beneath her hand. "I am sorry, Your Highness," Lilith said as she came closer to Marissa. "Daydreaming again, I see," Lilith said, her black eyes just staring. "No, I'm just frantic about today," Marissa said, walking back into her room. Lilith followed her, fetching a red robe made from the finest fabric in Minselthwaite. She held the robe out, allowing Marissa to slip her elegant arms into the sleeves. "It is a big day for you, for all of us. I wish you a happy birthday, my lady." "Oh, Lilith, don't wish that upon me. How I wish today didn't even come," Marissa said as she let herself fall backwards onto her bed. "I hate today, and I have been dreading this day for some time." "Today is a happy day," Lilith said as she lit the fireplace on the far side of the room, getting it ready to heat some water for Marissa's bath. "Today is a day of great change, a day that celebrates a new beginning, a new way of things," Lilith said as she smiled her odd smile. She seemed more excited about that day than Marissa did. Lilith walked over to the side of the bed, still smiling. "A day of great change, a new way of things? What is she talking about?" Marissa thought to herself as she just lay there, staring out of the balcony at the sunrise. The sky was a brilliant orange now, with flecks of crisp blues scattered about it. "Don't say such things," Marissa said, turning towards Lilith. As long as Marissa had known her, that was the very first time Lilith had ever seemed to be so excited about something. "I believe I have never seen you smile, Lilith, and today you seem to be laughing on the inside. Why are you so happy, and why do you insist that it is a great day?" Marissa thought, noticing how much Lilith had physically changed over the years. Her face was strange looking. Marissa thought that Lilith once looked pleasant, but now with the dark rings under her dark eyes and the contrast of her ghostly white skin against those wide, coal-colored eyes, she didn't look so pretty anymore. Her once vibrant blonde hair was pulled back into a pile of braids, and she wore her usual plain, dark blue servant gown. All the handmaidens wore the same thing except Lilith, who wore a thin leather belt around her waist, accompanied with a large ring of keys that hung from it. She held the keys to every door in the castle. "I'll fetch some water to warm for your bath, my lady." She quickly walked out of the room, closing the large wooden door behind her. Marissa continued to just lay there, unimpressed and saddened, staring at the canopy of fabric that was draped over the top of her bed. She thought of what would happen if she were to just run away. She probably wouldn't get too far, and would have nowhere to go. She could ask Taryn to guide her and Natalia to accompany her, but they couldn't possibly live in the forest for the rest of their lives. Or maybe they could. Taryn knows everything about the forest, and what to do and what to eat. Marissa's thoughts of what would happen that day and running away whirled through her mind, giving her a headache. Besides, what would odd Lilith do then? Lilith was to come with her to the new kingdom to continue her status as head handmaiden. Lilith would probably hunt her down if she did run away. She was that type of person to do that. But even though Lilith submitted to Marissa, there was still something about her that Marissa didn't like. She was strange and cold, and carried an eerie presence about her. Her demeanor was uptight and different. She never attended Sunday church with Marissa. She never ate with Marissa, and she always refused to go near Taryn when they saw him in the marketplace. And there was something about her that sent chills down Marissa's spine sometimes. There seemed to be no life behind her dark brown, almost black eyes. Marissa turned on her side towards the fireplace. The large mouth of the fireplace roared with a bright orange fire. The flames seemed to dance as they crackled and popped. The feelings of sadness and anxiety welled up inside of her, lingering like an illness as she stared into the dancing fire. She didn't like that Lilith used her fireplace to heat up her bathwater, but she knew that it would be a huge hassle for Lilith to carry huge vats of hot water up and down from the kitchen to her room. Lilith insisted that this way was much easier, which it was, but Marissa didn't like it. Lilith knew that Marissa hated fire, but seemed not to care. She just kept away from fireplaces, and fire for that matter. She would rather freeze to death than sit in front of a fireplace. There was something about fire that terrified her. It reminded her of death and sadness, and for some strange reason, her childhood. Marissa never really talked of her childhood, except for the experiences she had with Natalia. The only good memories of her childhood seemed to be just of her companions. She didn't even have any memories of her mother, but only the knowledge of how great of a woman she was and the stories she heard from her father and other courtiers around the palace. Moral, Taryn's mother even had lots of great things to say about her. By the many haunting paintings of her mother and around the castle, Marissa could see how beautiful she was and that she resembled her mother greatly, which she was proud of. The only difference was that her mother had darker red hair and her eyes weren't as vibrant of a blue as Marissa's. Marissa would ask her father sometimes about her mother, when she would have the chance to actually sit down and talk with him, but he would never say too much about the deceased queen. She would even ask him about her grandmother and grandfather sometimes, but he always changed the subject abruptly, as if he was hiding something. She kept a large family portrait painting in her room, hanging right above the fireplace. She was only a baby in the painting, but loved to look upon it anyways. Marissa didn't like the painting being above the mantel of the fireplace though, but that was the only spot in her room that she could clearly see from her bed. Her father looked happier in it, as well as her mother, who had a lovely smile. They seemed to be in love by the looks of the painting and by what everyone had said. Maybe my future husband won't be so horrid, and maybe we can fall in love like mother and father, Marissa wondered as she put her hands beneath her head, still lying on her back. Maybe he will be handsome and fall in love with me, but not because he has to, but because he truly wants to, and I him. Hopefully he is caring and loves the Holy Father, like Taryn. Oh, Taryn, how I will miss you and everything that you do for me. Marissa's eyes became flooded with tears as she continued to think of everything. I think I will miss you most of all, Taryn, and how I feel so free when I'm with you. Nothing will ever be the same. Nothing. I will have no one in Ishkar. Even though we are just friends, I will miss you so badly, more than you would ever know. Marissa continued to look at the painting above the roaring fire. Her eyes became red as tears trickled down the sides of her face. She longed for her mother and her company through this dubious day, her birthday. She wished it was her mother whom she could talk to, and not just daunting Lilith. She wished it was her mother who would be the one to comfort her, but she knew she would never see her mother. The only loved ones in her life were her friends, whom she would have to leave the very next day. She would even miss her father, whom seemed too busy to pay any attention to her during these times, or any time for that matter. Mercer rolled into her stomach and buried her face into her pillow, feeling alone. Even though she was a princess and looked up upon with great respect, she felt alone and never had anyone really to talk to in the great cold castle. At times, she even felt lost. She knew that crying would do nothing to help her, but that was the only thing she could do.